Hey, welcome to the Driven Stone Podcast, the podcast where two friends raise a glass and have a conversation. I'm Nick.
I'm Kyle.
Kyle.
Yes, sir.
Today, we are joined by a very special guest. We've got Mark from Stowe Cider. Hey, Mark, how's it going?
I'm doing well. How are you guys doing? Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're doing well too. So Mark's going to walk us through some aspects of cider. We'll talk a little bit about Stowe, and we'll talk about some of the ciders. We're going to do a cider tasting and just have some fun. What do you think?
I think that sounds great. I think everybody remembers the episode that we did at Stowe Cider, and ever since that experience, we've been dying to get back and talk about some of the things that are going on at Stowe Cider.
Absolutely.
So super excited to be able to get this going.
Yeah, and super excited to have you here, Mark. So it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. Any chance to talk cider, count me in.
Before we get into some of the finer points of cider making with Mark, I think a great place to start would be a tasting. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm ready to,
Let's get down to business. We'll taste the high and dry. Then we're going to taste the Mountain Glow, which is our newest year-round release. Our Shandy, which is our current summer seasonal, spring and summer seasonal, and then the Puff Puff, which is one of our hit singles and limited releases.
Cool. All right. Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right, Mark, why don't you lead us through our first cider?
All right. Well, this is always my favorite part, the tasting.
Ours too.
I get to wet my whistle and also share, what I'm passionate about, and that's making cider here. And so I'd be remiss not to start off with our flagship cider, the High and Dry. It's the one that we've been making all 9 years of our existence, and our number one selling product still to this day. So it's really kind of the foundation of what we do and kind of what draws in the new consumer for Stowe Cider, the people who are really looking to sample what a true dry cider is, at least to us. So that's going to be the one found here in the blue can.
Okay.
It's the High and Dry. It's zero residual sugar. It's preservative free, and it's 6.5% alcohol. So the beautiful thing about this is there is nowhere to hide. It is just straight fermented apples. So no room for anything to go wrong, because you're gonna end up with a poor cider. And it's also the hardest to make because we aren't using any preservatives throughout the process to control the fermentation. So it is. I
love that.
It is just straight yeast and an apple cider, and then you get High and Dry.
Nature at work.
That's actually something that we talk about a lot when we go to breweries is, if you're a brewery that can do a Kolsch or something like that and just kill it, then that tells me that all your other stuff is going to be great.
Yep.
All right, Kyle, the High and Dry.
High and Dry.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've had one of these. Crowd goes wild.
I know.
You can see it pours kind of a nice clear straw color, moderate bubbles, nothing that's going to fill you up too much, but add a nice little sparkle to it. It's got a nice green apple smell. It's extremely crisp. It's refreshing. It's a little tart in the back of the mouth, and it makes you want another sip. And that's what I love. Kind of puckers you up for a little bit, but it's not quickly. It's kind of a medium last in your palate, and then it just wants you to get that other sip.
On the nose, it smells a lot to me like a white wine, like a Pinot Grigio.
Yeah, it definitely has those elements to it. You can almost get the kind of the effervescence kind of a thing. But there's a really sweet.
Yeah, there really is. I was going to say it's almost like after you've bitten to a Granny Smith and you kind of I don't know if you've ever smelled the Granny Smith after you've bitten.
I have not nosed a Granny Smith in my day. It's been a minute since I've had a Granny Smith.
Yeah, I don't really. Granny Smith aren't my favorite apples.
Yeah, no, they're good in a pie, but
that's about it.
That's about it.
Yeah. But, it's got that really sweet, but just slight sour going on.
Yeah. And I'd go dark sweet.
All right. I'm going in.
All right.
Yeah. That's dry.
Yeah, it is.
Wow.
That is such a curveball from the nose.
Yeah. Cause the nose, you get so much sweet. And then on the palate,
not a drop.
Yeah. It's gone.
Nothing. Just dry and refreshing AF.
Legit, super refreshing. You could, I'm not advocating for pounding one of these by any means. But you damn near could. Yeah, it would go down easy.
Yeah, and you would be chilled.
It's a 16
you would
ounce.
Be crisp.
You would. The 16 ounce can, man, no added sugar, gluten free cider that's as high as the Mount Mansfield and as dry as they come.
Yeah,
no sugar,
6.5%.
No preservatives, just apples. That is delicious.
Yeah, no, that is fantastic.
All right,
I'm already thinking that's gonna be hard to beat.
I agree.
That's so refreshing.
And again, because it's so dry and not super carbonated, it's not going to fill you up. And you don't feel quite as guilty or terrible the next day when you have a few.
Yeah,
which is always important. Which is always important.
That's super important.
That's a great point, and that's like such a quintessential part of cider to me. Is like that puckering kind of thing that it just encourages you to. I'm going to keep drinking this for a while.
Yeah, the versatility of cider. I don't want to take up too much time about that, but the versatility of cider when it comes, not only is it phenomenal on its own. It makes great cocktails. That's something that we've done a phenomenal job here. I've got to get a credit to my taproom team and, our taproom manager, Bree, who's running the cocktail program, working with all local distilleries to come up with, diverse cocktails.
I was going to say, did I just see a post that y'all are working with Smuggler's Notch on a cocktail? Yeah.
Cider and Stormy, I believe is what it's called there. So it's our take on a dark and stormy with their rum and our new Mountain Glow cider, which we're going to taste here next.
Super cool.
It's a lot of fun. It keeps the local collaborations going, but just adds another level. Like, hey, you don't have to drink this on your own. You can drink it and make some cocktails, and then also you can cook with it. And so, we love to get to a point, where we're providing recipes or suggestions. I love to brine meat with it.
That's fantastic. I never thought of that.
Where you use wine, you use the white wine, you can use the cider. If you use a non-alcoholic apple cider, you could use an alcoholic apple cider in its place. And so once you realize, if you get a crowler, 32 ounces, and hey, it's just me, you can make yourself pour yourself a glass, start making some dinner, then turn the rest of that crowler into a cocktail.
I love that.
You've got a diverse 32 ounces of cider in one meal 3 ways. Forget about it.
Right. I mean, we've got some Smuggler's Notch back here on the shelf. Like, we could totally mix up that drink.
Yeah, there we go.
Good.
Like, I can't wait, man.
In terms of the high and dry, is there anything that you recommend pairing it with in terms of maybe food wise or?
Yeah, I mean, I think it pairs really well with spicy food. It definitely pairs well with fish and chicken. Those would be my go-to. There isn't really much it doesn't pair with, just because it is. I don't want to call it, overly simple. It's just very approachable. And it's not super strong in one way or the other. So it really helps accentuate the foods that you're eating because of the tartness and the crispness, where it doesn't overpower the meal. It just kind of enhances it.
Awesome.
Mark, I think, from myself personally, ciders are going through a bit of a boom right now.
Absolutely.
My wife is a huge cider fan, and was kind of my entry point into ciders. So when we were up in Vermont, it was a big point of emphasis that we were going to go to as many cideries as possible. And I wonder if you could just kind of walk us through the process of making a cider.
Sure, I'd love to take that from seed to glass for you.
There you go.
So as you know, cider all starts with the apple. The apple is going to dictate a lot of what we do here, and certainly the blend of the apple, the origin of the apple is where it all starts. So you've got the apple orchards that exist throughout Vermont, the Northeast, is a very popular growing region. We're lucky enough to have a lot of dessert fruit that produce really quality ciders that a lot of us, regional producers use. It's called modern fruit, dessert fruit. Typical apples would be considered Macintosh, Galas, Fuji's, Empires, Honeycrisp, Granny Smiths, and those would be some of the categories of the modern fruit that are really accessible to us cider makers. And then the more limited release and the more traditional method is going to be using more heirloom and heritage fruit. It's going to be, Kingston Blacks and apples of that nature that are more rare to find, something you're not going to find in the grocery store because they're much more tannic and bitter. So they're not often used as much for eating or cooking, but they were, planted and kept around really for making delicious cider because they're so complex.
So are those specific cider apples? I mean, these things were cultivated for cider.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the wild apples, going, back to the days of the original cider makers, they grew like that. They weren't cultivated specifically for cider. They were the cider, the apples that already existed. They were wild apples or feral apple trees. We're essentially winemakers. For those of you that know a little bit about wine, we're just using apples instead of grapes. So typically, you're not going to find a very good wine made from table grapes, and so some of the more generic apples by themselves might not make the best cider. So it's often a blend of those apples or the more, heirloom and wild or feral original apples that exist.
So in terms of, Mark, you just mentioned a blend. As a cider maker yourself, when you're thinking about, is recipe a right term to use?
Sure. Okay. Oh, yeah. I mean, a recipe certainly, okay. And the blend is definitely going to be the start to that recipe. And, as a cider maker, what we're looking for our year-round ciders is a consistent blend, that makes up three different things. It's going to be the sugar content that we all know and love because that's what produces the alcohol, right? The higher the sugar, the more alcohol you're going to get from that fermentation. The acidity, which is going to offer that bite and balance to any sweetness. It's also going to provide the pH and the stability to the product, right? So if you have a lower pH, you're going to have more stability for that product inside of a can or a keg or a bottle. And then tannins, which are going to be, those complexities that you find, whether that's, a little bit of bitter or mouth drying, mouth puckering. You're going to find those tannins that, come in on that back end.
Fantastic. Is the blend something that you kind of, you get to first and then you kind of batch that and see what's developing?
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, just like, any process, you're going to find you're not always going to get the same apples every year.
Right.
The amount of rain that you get, the soil, where they're grown, all can change some of those characteristics that I talked about, the sugar, the acidity, and the tannins. So what we're doing is we're trying to find apples that year that are within that spec. And that's going to be the best, the best starting point. So it's not necessarily, hey, we're going to use 60% Macintosh, 30% Gala, 10% Kings of Black. It's not as specific as that, as much as it would be nice if it were.
Right.
But year to year and orchard to orchard, you're going to find those differences. And so we're going to try to have to change those blends, throughout the year, depending on what the harvests are like.
So along those same lines, and you are also the president and one of the founding members of the Vermont Cider Association, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So not only is he a cider maker, but he also knows a bunch of other cider makers too.
Right.
So I guess my question too, when you're thinking about this recipe and you guys come out with a product and that this is going to be a product that you're going to release every year. So every year, much like a wine, it's going to be slightly different. Whereas like a beer, kind of once you get that recipe, it's pretty much dialed in. I mean, there can be small changes, but with a cider, a single can, if it stays around or sits around for a season or two, you might be able to taste those differences between them.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to find the differences from batch to batch throughout the year. And so our goal, as I mentioned, is trying to find as consistent of a blend as possible to recreate the product. But like you mentioned, beer, not that they have an easy job. There's a reason I'm not a brewer because I was never very good at following rules, right? Time and temperature, ingredient numbers. And so that was never my specialty. So I moved into, more of the blend and taste, the more chef versus baker role. And so, within that, it is, manipulating and finding those blends, blending batch to batch to get those consistencies as close as possible. And also there's a ton of education with the consumer that goes into being a cider maker, because there's this new renaissance, right, over the course of the last 15 years or so, where cider's back on the scene and people are learning, what the differences are. There's not just one producer, any longer, or a couple producers. There's so many, and they're, using so many different apples and yeast that a lot of it is educating. Why are they different? Right. Or why is this batch different than the last batch? And you start to relate it to wine, and they get that.
Right.
Every batch is like a new vintage, more or less. And as long as it's really high quality and really pretty close to the same, I think our customers almost appreciate that because we're using real ingredients and working with commodities and raw goods right off the land.
There's almost a more craft aspect that even a craft beer, and nothing against craft beer. We love craft beer. To me, it sounds like what you're saying is there's more of an artistry that goes into, now we've got to get this flavor profile and we've got to dial this in, and there's too much of this apple and there's too much of this kind of sweet going on.
Yeah. And I also think, we're up against some challenges as cider makers. There are so many touch points, and we're not dealing with, the brewing where you're often, starting with, raw ingredients and boiling them, cooking things off, making it more sterile and aseptic. We're starting with something that was, grown in a field that was then picked up, wild animals everywhere, right? Then picked by an orchardist or a farmer. It's got to be transferred into a bin. Then it's got to be pressed. Then it's got to be delivered to us in a tanker truck. Unless you press on site, then it's got to be stored somewhere in a vessel. And so it goes through all these step points before it gets to the fermentation. So there's a lot of factors in there and a lot of touch points that you don't really have the same kill steps, if you will, before the fermentation starts. It is similar to the wine in that sense, but it's a lot of touch points for sure.
Pretty incredible. I mean,
it really is.
In my head, I'm equating it to like realism in art as opposed to like more abstract impressionism, where it's like each time you're going to see something a little bit different over here. Sure. A more painterly approach, and then over here it's more definitive, concrete. That's so crazy.
All right, Kyle, you ready for the next one?
Indeed.
All right, Mark, what you got?
Let's do it. So this one I'm really excited about. We just released it last month, or earlier this month, actually. And this is Mountain Glow. It's a ginger lemon orange, and it is a year round. And it's what I'm super proud of. It was a full team effort coming from the blending, the trials, the naming, kind of brought everybody together, which was a fun project, I think, for the team. And it really turned out even better than I could have had hoped. So similar to the high and dry, it's got a nice, bright, clear straw color, a little bit of haze because we're doing the filtration process prior to adding the ginger and lemon, which we're doing an infusion and a steep there. And so it's got a little bit of a haze to it, but it allows us to keep a lot of those flavors in, throughout the process and throughout the years of making these ciders. We've had to do a lot of experimenting, and as we've gotten better at the process, we're doing a lot more, post filtration blending and steeping, just because you're going to get more flavor. It's going to go a lot longer, and we're a lot more confident in the stability of the product just because of our practices and sanitation and everything, that we don't worry about them spoiling. And we're fortunate to have a really strong distribution network where we're getting fresh product to the consumer, and lucky that it's moving through. So cheers. This one's the Mountain Glow, and one I'm really proud of.
All right, the Mountain Glow.
Mountain Glow.
Yeah. All right, on the nose, you definitely get the ginger.
Yeah, like right off the bat.
Yeah.
I mean, you definitely would not confuse that for anything else. It is definitely ginger forward.
I get the citrus notes. I don't know if I can necessarily pick out lemon and orange, but I definitely get the citrus notes for sure.
Yeah, I definitely get lemon.
Yeah.
Orange is the one that's a little bit more difficult for me to kind of parse out.
Well, I mean, that's a good point too, because lemon is such a specific,
right.
You either nail lemon or you don't.
Yeah. And this is very fresh lemon.
Yeah, really bright.
Yeah.
Mark, you mentioned that it's lemon and orange, but now that I'm really thinking about it, I get the lemon, and it's I'm reaching for the orange, but let's see if it changes on the palate.
Right. But it is amazingly floral. Really, really strong floral.
Yeah. All right. On the palate,
this one is very much reminiscent of the nose also.
Yeah.
You get a lot of the exact same flavors. You can definitely get the ginger again. Definitely up front, and then followed by that lemon, but still really refreshing.
Yeah.
I mean, I see a theme.
Yeah.
Refreshing. Very crisp, very refreshing.
What I really like is when you get that ginger, and that ginger just cuts through.
Right.
And it's that spicy enough ginger where you got something to think about.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
I could totally see this one being something you want to start your meal with.
Right.
It's kind of a palate
cleanser. Sure.
It definitely has that kind of an element to it of here you go, let's go ahead and hit a baseline for your senses for you to move forward into the next course. Maybe you have this in between salad and entree.
Yeah.
Delicious.
It is delicious. And you know what? I could totally see this too. And I think I see another theme that, man, after a hot day, you just mowed the lawn or something, and you want something to quench that thirst, and man, this is good.
Yeah. Totally.
Yeah, you mentioned the haze aspect, and I think that something that people are becoming more okay with is a drink like that. I mean, not only through cider, but also through a bunch of different beers that are hazy. And whereas, I don't know, maybe 15, 20 years ago, if you handed someone a hazy beer or cider like the Mountain Glow, they're going to say there's something wrong with this thing.
Right.
But that's what's so cool about, the education of ciders, and what you just said, the inclusion of a bunch of different things like the orange and the ginger, where now you can start to, show people this stuff equals flavor.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we're not using, essences or doing any of that. These are real ingredients, and that's going to look like that if you want, real stuff. And, I think we have a lot to thank beer for in that regards. There was a huge hazy push, and, our direct neighbors here, the Alchemist, Hetty Topper, everybody's heard of them, right? And so with that, please drink it from this can, because when they started producing that beer, they didn't want people to pour it out. They wanted people to taste it for what it was and the quality and the flavor that you're going to get from it. And they didn't want people to pour it out because they were nervous it'd get turned off because wow, look at this. It's got chunks in it, pretty much,
That's crazy.
And so, right on the can, please drink from the can. And that was, I think, part of it.
I remember seeing that.
Yeah. Let's get it first for its taste. And then, then we could judge it by appearance. But ultimately, we're drinking it because it tastes good, not necessarily because it looks good.
Well, and Mark, if I can get you to, something we like to always talk about is the nose. It's got an amazing nose on it.
Oh, it does. I mean, it is incredibly floral. It took us a little while because ginger can be overwhelming.
Right.
You get some nice, strong ginger notes on the nose, but a lot more subtle in the flavor. I think the way it combines with the cider, it doesn't have that burn, but it's got the bite. And so I think, for me, that was really important because, you take the acidity of the cider and then add in the burn of the ginger, and it could be a scary combination for some people.
Sure.
Especially depending on what you're eating. But I think what was really nice about this combination is that they work really well together, and somehow the acidity took away, especially with the time we put it in for, some of the burn from the ginger, where you get a little bit of that bite without the burn, which is really great. And then you complement it with the floralness and the bright citrus notes of lemon and ginger. Forget about it. This one is great.
So you talked about, obviously what goes into ciders in terms of apples and yeast and this fermentation process. So you mentioned something, the apples being pressed. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and how, I guess it's the extraction of liquid from the apples?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So, we're going to start at the orchard. We're going to pick the apples. We're going to send them into cold storage. So there's these facilities that load the bins of apples into a room. They suck out the oxygen and pump it in with CO2 and nitrogen, essentially drop the temperatures to just above freezing. So the apples are still alive, if you will. So they're not frozen, but they're not aging very quickly. Some apples last longer. So, different times of the year, you have better access to certain apples, and you can store apples now all year long, some of them. And so they will get pulled out of those cold storage facilities, and then they'll be pressed. So they'll be chopped up into little pieces through a grinder and then essentially squeezed through, bladder press or rack and cloth. There's a variety of different techniques. Some cost more money and some are more automatic and automated. Some are more labor intensive. And so with that, they squeeze out the juice and strain out the majority of the organics in the pulp. At which point, for us at least, since we're not growing or pressing, they're pumping that into a tanker truck, similar that you would see dairy milk delivered in, or even oil. I promise you, they're not the same tankers. And so they get pumped into those tankers and then delivered to us, where we'll pump them into our, stainless fermenters and start the process in our facility.
So then you get, a tanker full or whatever, you've ordered of this kind of apple juice at that point.
Yep. And so we work with these orchards specifically. And if it's not directly the orchard, we're working with a press house to work on that blend. So, hey, here are our specs. We need it, at this pH. It needs to be this Brix level sugar content, and then the tannins stay fairly consistent from apple to apple. And there are ways to measure the tannins, but to be honest, we do more modern style ciders. Tannins are a bonus, but they're not something that we're as concerned about here at Stowe Cider. But there's some models where tannins are everything they're worried about. And that's going to be more of a complex cider, that they're, in my opinion, more wine-like, something you're going to pair with food, something you might more of a serious cider, if you will.
And then what's going to be the time frame of when you receive the juice from the press of before it's ready to go?
Yep. So harvest season, as everybody knows, is the fall here. Could start as early as August and go through as late as November, depending on the apple.
We were right there in the middle of it.
Yeah, we were.
Right. And then they get stored. And then so when we call, they're going to pull them out of the bin. Within a couple days, they'll be pressed. Within a couple days after that, they'll be delivered. So you got a little less than a week.
Wow.
And then start to finish for us is going to be roughly about 3 weeks from delivery to can, depending on the variety. Obviously, if it's barrel aged, that's going to be a little bit longer. If it's going to be hopped, or there's going to be infused products or co-ferments, those are going to extend those times a little bit. So anywhere from 3 to 5 weeks is going to be a solid turnaround.
It sounds a lot more complex than you going to the river and just like these apples are floating in the river.
Stop right there, sir. Man, like absolutely fascinating.
All right, Kyle, ready to move on to the next one?
Yeah, let's try the next one.
All right, Mark, what you got?
All right, let's take it away. This is the first sign of spring here at Stowe Cider. Even though, in Vermont, we're only getting 1 or 2 days a month at this point, or a week. Maybe.
We had our couple of days of spring like 3 weeks ago. It's long gone.
Is that right? You guys are into summer? Or?
Oh man, we're right into it.
Well, it's basically been summer here in Florida since last summer.
Yeah, right.
we have like the day of winter and then like the day of spring.
Yeah,
and then summer all the time.
And then summer. All right, rub it in.
Yeah, it's amazing. No. You get really tired of it really quick.
Yeah, this one is called Shandy, which I'm pretty sure most of the listeners and you guys can guess what that means. But it is one of the first fruited ciders that we made.
Interesting.
Being that we blended it with a homemade lemonade. So we describe it as a hazy cider with homemade lemonade. We bring it down to 5.5% because of that, which makes it incredibly refreshing. Poolside, beachside,
yes,
tailgating, you name it. It adds just enough refreshing lemonade flavor while keeping the backbone of the cider. So you don't feel like you're drinking a spiked drink here. It's cider, but you're getting the fresh lemonade, which complements it really nicely. And the 5%, lends itself to having a couple more that way.
Yeah, you just said something that I find that it's so difficult to achieve is that balance of a lemonade to a cider. And getting it so that you don't get too much lemonade or you don't get too much cider. So you're getting both and it doesn't make it feel as if one is overpowering the other. And that blend, that kind of Radler style in terms of beer is again, an art form in and of itself of you're getting both. And here's exactly, the mix is just perfect.
Yeah, you couldn't make Nick happier right now because he is a Shandy lover.
Man, I love a good Shandy. I really do.
Voila.
Whew. All right, on the Shandy, Kyle.
Yep. On the nose.
I get similar kind of notes of just the straight up cider notes, but there's some lemon in there. They're like lemon peel.
Yeah, like heavy lemon peel for me.
Yeah.
Like you just chopped a lemon, squeezed it,
yep,
and then like smelled the rind that was left over.
I feel like some lemon things can very easily go like lemon pledge, and this does not go there.
Yeah, no, it doesn't go like artificial sweet lemon.
Right. Like
it stays like really like organic.
Yeah, it doesn't go in that country time lemonade.
Right. There's something danky.
Okay, I'm glad it's not just me.
There's a little funk in there.
Little funk in there.
Yeah, but I mean, it's hazy AF.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
So
I'm sure that's some of that, just kind of that organic bits in there.
Yeah. Mark, I'm going to read the can for you. When life gives you lemons, just kidding. But this cider truly is the main squeeze. I love how if you look at the can and they kind of give you the profile of whether it's Stowe sweet or super dry.
Right.
So I really like that. That's super cool.
Yeah.
On the palate, Kyle. Wow.
Man, that's also really dry.
It really is. Now this one says it's right there in the middle. Totally summer and pleasantly tart.
Yeah, tart's a great word.
Tart
it's
is
not
perfect.
Sour. It's
tart. Yeah. Yeah.
Has a bite to it.
There's a bite to it.
Bites on your tongue.
There's a lemony nature that I really like, but it's muted. And I feel like the cider kind of takes a little bit over here, which I'm not saying is a bad thing, but like I almost want just a little more lemon on the palate.
Yeah, I mean, for it to be Shandy, in your head, I'm thinking like Shandy beers that tend to be like very lemony and very sweet.
Right.
Almost lemonade. This doesn't get into the ballpark of lemonade.
Right.
It stays more on that refreshing, crisp, tart side.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you go to a brewery and if they're making a Shandy or a Radler, they're probably using some like pre-mixed super sweet lemonade and mixing it with their light beer. So it just gives you this like sweet lemony bomb, which is great in and of itself in some instances. But when you want something that's just like super refreshing, man, this that hits the spot.
That's going to quench you right there.
Absolutely. After like a long bike ride or like a jog or, I don't know, 18 holes on the golf course.
Yeah, this one's good. Again, definitely mess around with some cocktails. Anything that calls for lemonade, just put a cider shandy topper on it.
So you said that you guys are making your own lemonade and then putting it in this?
Yep. Yeah. So we make our own lemonade. We work with some local fruit producers. We're not hand juicing the lemons anymore. We've gotten a little big for that, but we're working, with lemon juice from fruit processors. We're go ahead and then we're making the lemonade in house and blending it with cider. So, we get the finished product here. And then, we do have some cocktails, but I think the most popular are the slushies when it comes to Shandy.
Shandy slushy.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Really
yep.
does.
Yeah,
exactly.
Fantastic.
And if you're feeling adventurous, go ahead and throw a little local gin or vodka in it, and you're having yourself a good afternoon there.
I can't think
Sounds like a good afternoon nap coming right there.
So when you guys, this one specifically, when you were first making it, is it one of those like we made lemonade and we obviously have cider, let's just put it together and then pushing that out in terms of the tap room, or was it no, we want to make a specific Stowe Shandy?
We wanted a specific Shandy. Yeah, it wasn't. We do now make a non-alcoholic, what we call fresh squeeze as part of our fresh press non-alcoholic line, and so that is actually after the hard cider version. We definitely wanted to make our version of a Shandy something that's going to be a bit more refreshing and lower alcohol, for those warm summer days.
Awesome.
I would like to take it now towards like Stowe specifically.
Absolutely.
Stowe Cider. How old is Stowe Cider?
All right. So we've been around since 2013. So we're, excited to celebrate 9 years, almost at the decade mark. We moved into a new facility in 2017, which was kind of the birth of the Stowe Cider as you know it, since we've been really, focusing on wholesale and packaging cans. So we've been about 5 years into the bigger wholesale side of things.
Super cool.
Yeah. And beautiful place too. I mean, there, like a lot of seating outside, a lot of, place to come in, grab a couple ciders, a flight. We did a flight.
We did a couple.
When
flights.
were you here last?
Late September.
Yeah,
right at the end of September last year.
Of 2021.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah, so you saw the expanded tap room, and I don't know if the garden was open out back at that point or not.
We got there late, and if it was, we didn't make it back there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Around back, but
we
loved it.
So in that area of Vermont, and maybe Vermont as a whole, there seems to be quite a few cideries. So what makes Stowe Cider, or what sets Stowe Cider apart from all the others?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think we're up to 18 cider makers here in the state of Vermont.
Wow.
For a small state like this is pretty impressive. We've got a wide variety of cider makers, all of whom I respect greatly for kind of taking on their own path, adding something unique to the industry. We've got small producers who are growing their own apples, and are a team of 2 or 3 people at max. And then we've got all the way up to Woodchuck, who's been around and slinging cider since 1991, I believe. They celebrated 30 years, and they must employ over 100 employees or more, and distribute nationally, if not internationally. So we've got a broad spectrum, which I think makes it a pretty diverse place to sample cider. For Stowe Cider, I think where we kind of fit in was we were an emphasis on dry before dry was really widely produced here in the Northeast. I'm not saying we're the first people to ever make a dry cider, because that wouldn't be true, but we, to my knowledge, were some of the first to put dry cider in a can and distribute it as widely as we did, and focus all of our SKUs, 7 grams of sugar or less. And in the beginning, we didn't add any sugar to any of our products or have any residual sugars. So that was really our focus to get going and introducing people to a product that didn't need to be sweet.
Is that, part and parcel because like you found a niche that like, now this is how we can engage? Is it because like this is the style of ciders that Stowe Cider liked, or that you liked as a whole? Like what caused you to go down that path?
Yeah, I mean, personally, it's what I prefer.
Right.
And I always just kind of said, I'm going to be honest, I'm going to do this because it's what I enjoy. So I'm going to do what I enjoy doing. And if people are into it, whether that be employees, the community, consumers as a whole, then maybe I'm onto something and we should run with it. And if not, then, we'll be content just keeping it a hobby or very small. And it was never really this pressure to say, I had all these investors and let's go ahead and scale this business and try to sell it as far as we can. That was never our model. the model was to make the cider that we here at Stowe Cider enjoyed producing and have fun with it. And hopefully other people enjoyed it. And we're lucky to say so far that other people are enjoying it.
Well, and Mark, is a drier cider, is that a more like traditional, like historical part of cider?
That's a great question. I've always wondered that.
Because I remember we were in London and we were at a market that was selling cider, and they had, I think we ended up buying a traditional cider, and it was very dry.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple of reasons for that. That is the traditional method going back to England or to France. It was more on the drier cider. If you let the cider ferment and don't stop it or don't add sweetness, that's what you get. And so it probably was, not to take any credit away from me and my team here, but it was probably the easier thing to do. When you have less resources, you don't deal with pasteurization as much or, any sort of stabilization through the process because you don't worry about re-fermentation happening.
Right.
So, it still obviously needs to be sterile. Otherwise, you're going to end up with bugs, not literal bugs, but like organisms inside your cider, bacteria, that are going to change over time. So you still always have to have a sterile operation. But if you don't have sugar inside of the product, you don't worry about a re-fermentation,
right?
Which, I mean, we've all heard of beer and cider and wine re-fermenting, causing bottle bombs, can bombs, you name it.
That happened myself.
Yeah. And so dry cider is a little lower risk when it comes to entry into the packaging world.
In terms of that, is it also something that ships easier or is a little more shelf stable, I guess?
Yeah, exactly. For those reasons, it's going to be more shelf stable. It's going to last longer. Really, any new cider maker is probably going to lean towards a drier cider in a glass bottle because that's going to be, it's reduced oxygen through bottling lines are typically lower DO and dissolved oxygen. And, the cans offer just an extra touch point and oxygen pickup. So, that's kind of where we got our start, but ultimately it was what we enjoyed. And we saw there were other producers here in Vermont and the Northeast who were producing sweeter ciders. And so it was kind of, we hit the right space at the right time.
I think that's something that when we talk to people about ciders that a lot of people mention, they'll say something like, I don't like ciders. They're too sweet, or I can only have one or two. And then it becomes too much. And we have conversations like, you should try a dry cider or a semi-dry or something like that, because you'll start to branch out and find that there is a cider for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different cider styles out there now. It's unbelievable. And again, it goes back to that educational piece, right? We're lucky to have a tap room with a lot of visitors come through. We've got 24 draft lines. We have dedicated a couple to beer, but the rest are all ciders produced in-house. And we essentially, promise everybody they're going to find a cider that they like. If you're willing to sit down and try 20 ciders, we'll find one for you.
Challenge accepted. Yeah.
It sounds like an afternoon I'd like to have.
Right.
Man, Kyle, I've liked everything that we've done so far.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, and I really like the journey that we've gone on from something, the original, the high-end dry,
right,
to some of the newer stuff.
Yep.
But Mark said he has one more.
Yeah, and I think I'm the most curious about this one.
Me too. Mark, what you got?
Yeah, so, we pride ourselves not only on dry ciders, but experimental ciders. And we're trying to push the boundary and do things that other producers haven't done, or might be scared to do, or might even believe are sacrilegious to cider production in itself. But that's okay. We'd like to have fun with it. We do these in small batches to distribute it to our adventurous fans. So this one right here is part of our hit single series, which means that it's, here today, gone tomorrow, essentially. We'll make one batch of it at a time. Typically, it'll only come once a year, or once every couple of years. And this one has been around for a couple of years. And so this will be, one of those limited releases, and it's Puff Puff Pineapple. And so we've teamed up with our friends over at Black Diamond Barbecue, producing some of Vermont's finest barbecue. And, I said, and, I had the conversation originally with my cousins who own a barbecue joint, Ray Brothers Barbecue in Central New York. And we're, how can we work together and do this collaboration? It didn't really pan out with them being in Central New York and wanted to keep it local. So what we decided to do is we said, hey, what about smoking something with applewood and infusing it into the cider?
Interesting.
So we had them take some applewood and, use it to smoke chili peppers, essentially. So we did smoked chili peppers on applewood, bringing it back to, the apple there, and then infuse that into the cider for roughly a week. We want to be sure that we're getting the smoke flavor, some of the pepper flavor without it turning vegetal. You don't want those to start turning, too green on you and starting to spoil.
Right.
So it's roughly about a week. And with that, We get the nice smoke. You get a little spice from the jalapeno. You get a little bit of that sweet pepper from the poblano. And then so we pull the peppers and then blend it in with some pineapple, because pineapple and jalapeno are just a phenomenal combination, if I do say so myself.
Indeed they are.
And so with that, you get a semi-dry cider with applewood smoked chili peppers and pineapple. And so we'll go ahead and taste that. I think my favorite part, about this is just as soon as you open the can, you get a plume of smoke in your face.
Right.
It's like, hey, buddy, pass it, puff, puff, and then there it is. And you get the nose, and you pour it down, and you start to get some of the green peppers. You're pouring the glass, mixing in with that, and slowly you're getting the citrus from the pineapple, which is just phenomenal. But again, we honor the apple, in my opinion. That's always going to be a part of it. So when you're finishing, your sip, you're going to get some of that nice apple and some of that good cider flavor kind of following and rounding it out.
Man, I'm really excited about this one.
Yeah, me too. In collaboration with Black Diamond Barbecue, like Mark said.
You're right.
This is fresh pressed cider, pineapple, peppers, and cane sugar.
Right.
I was looking forward to this one.
Yeah, for sure. It's there.
It's
There's
definitely there.
Puff of smoke there.
Wow. Yeah, Mark, you're not wrong.
Yeah, I even get like barbecue.
I know.
Like
It legit
mesquite.
like mesquite barbecue, right? It smells as if like you've taken a barbecue down to coals and you've already grilled your meat on it. So there's like those little crumbly bits.
Right.
And then you like just pineapple water.
Yeah.
Or something like that. And it's just like in the air.
Yeah, I even get like
that is strong.
like a green pepper.
Right. I do get a peppery note. Not like a black pepper, but
I get like a bell pepper.
Yeah, like the
a
peppers
green
you're
bell
mentioning,
pepper.
Mark. Yeah, absolutely. It's there. All right.
And wood. Like, I mean, it's totally there.
It's
now.
totally there. On the palate?
It matches the nose perfectly.
It really
Like, there are
does.
no curveballs at all. Like, I get all the exact same flavors on the palate that I got on the nose.
You know what? I will say it's perfectly balanced. I literally get all of the pineapple.
Mm-hmm.
It's there. You definitely get that smoke. It reminds me of a peaty scotch. Like it is pervasive.
Yep.
The peppers there, slight, just a bit.
So I get more pepper than I get pineapple.
Interesting. See, I get way more pineapple. And then you get like the cider cuts through all of that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, just like right down the middle.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's totally like adjacent. I mean, the cider is still fully there.
Oh, yeah.
You still get all the same flavors of the cider. And then it's just like wrapped around with this like smoky, peppery thing.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
I'm super interested in like the pairings of this particular cider because like I'm just thinking of all the like with a burger.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah, that would crush.
That would crush with a burger.
Absolutely.
Just a handful of bacon.
Oh yeah.
I mean, what doesn't
just
go with it?
anything at a barbecue.
Yeah.
Just
exactly.
anything.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
So you said that, there are, I guess, purists who would call something like this, your word, sacrilegious. Is that something that like, in terms of the future of cider or people just trying to push boundaries like you mentioned, is that something that, you find that other cider makers are doing as well? Not necessarily this exact thing, but let's see if we can infuse this stuff and let's try these different fruits.
I think so. I mean, I'm proud to see it. I do think that we are on the forefront of that, but we're not the only ones. And I do take inspiration from a lot of places in the culinary world, to to cocktails, to beer, to also other cider producers. And I think it's fun. I think people should continue to do that. There is going to be a place always for the pure cider, for honoring traditional methods. But we all like to experiment and go, beyond the apple a bit. And I think it's fun, and I think that people should continue to do that. We have been called out for going a little too far. We have a brainwave series, which is our like very experimental line of ciders. We've done gummy bears, co-fermenting gummy bears.
I remember it.
Yeah, we did that.
We did that one.
Yep. We've done peanut butter and jelly. So using peanut flour and Concord grape to make a peanut butter and jelly.
That's so cool.
We've done key lime pie with gluten-free graham crackers from a local producer here in Vermont. And so you're in the land of key lime pie,
yeah,
right?
Totally. The Vermont to Florida connection.
Yeah. And so, so we're just trying to to take what people enjoy, through food and through other liquids, and seeing if we can incorporate that into a cider that's going to, remind you of a place in the time and kind of bring you back to that connection. And I think that's what cider and food do so well, is they bring back memories, or they create memories. You might have a traditional cider that is a part of those great memories, but when the cider or the liquid or the meal is the great memory, man, that's a good feeling when you're behind the production of that.
And that's such a good point of like, the purpose of this is to have fun. And I know that there are cider purists, and I know that there are people like, nope, it can only be this thing, but why not? I mean, you might stumble upon something that is phenomenal, and like what you guys are doing here. You might have something that you're like, nope, we're never doing that one again, but you don't know until you try it. And that's half the fun. I'm sure as a cider maker, that's half the fun of doing what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I don't know how many Seinfeld fans are out there, but I feel like Jerry waking up at the middle of the night to write down a joke. That's where the brainwaves came from. Is keeping the pen and paper right next to the bed and waking up and saying, "Whoa, that sounds cool. I'll write it down." And sometimes I wake up and say, "What does that even mean?" But when it does come together and I get my team on board, or they're helping collaborate on some of these ideas, and I think that's a lot of the fun in it is. The collaboration aspect, utilizing local ingredients or working with local producers, to think outside the box and say, how can we take barbecue and mix it with cider?
That's so cool.
Let's do that. And yes, don't worry, it is, vegetarian and gluten free. So.
Nice. I did something similar. Remember the Swedish fish beer that I made? So I homebrew as just a hobby, but I was like, you know what? I wonder if I can make a beer with Swedish fish. So like I did a bunch of research, and everything said like it's not going to work out. It's not really possible. Like it's not going to go well. I'm like, let's try it and see what happens. And I thought it was great.
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
Notice I thought it was great. He's like,
I don't know if I can go great, but
I thought
definitely.
You might be onto something. We enjoy the working with candy, and especially if you can take the sugars out of it.
That's exactly
that just it blows people's minds. It's like with our gummy bears. It's like, that's got 2 grams of sugar in a 16-ounce can. And the fact that it tastes like gummy bears.
That's crazy.
Without the sugar, it's a little more guilt-free. It's great.
So along those same lines of kind of what you just mentioned about helping people find cider, how is Stowe Cider, or maybe the Vermont Cider Association as a whole, working to further the knowledge of ciders and cider making in America?
Yeah, so I mean that's a good question. I think we're fortunate enough to be members of the American Cider Association on the national level, who has a bit more resources. The Vermont Cider Association, we're pretty small. We're a volunteer run, so we're doing the best that we can. But right now, our focus is number one on legislation. We're looking to get, parity, especially tax wise and pour sizes, things of that nature that kind of put us on the same level playing field as beer, allow us to be able to invest dollars back into the companies that we're running by allowing us to pay lower tax rates. We've been taxed as wine, which has been a challenge for us. It's a lot higher than beer taxes. So locally, in a lot of states, their focus is often more legislative. And we're also throwing some festivals to, what we like to call getting liquid to lips, getting people to try cider. That's always the goal, so we can educate them. But we're lucky enough to have a lot of support from the American Cider Association and a lot more of the larger scale macro cideries who are putting money behind the marketing side of things.
So interesting. Like I've never really put so much thought into the similarities with cider, where it is kind of more of a wine beverage.
Yeah.
But even to hear that on that side of it, that it still falls there.
People don't understand us, and so that's what we're really trying to do. I mean,
I feel the same.
You got to get the word out there.
So it's just that we make our product like wine. We use local agriculture here, and then we also serve our stuff similar to beer, right?
Right.
At least a lot of us are putting into cans. So when you have higher prices or different pour sizes saying, hey, you're going to a brew fest and you can only put 2 ounces in because that's a sample size, yet beers over here are doing 6 ounces. But hey, I'm used to buying your stuff in a 16-ounce can, and now you're telling me at a festival I can only drink 2 ounces.
Right.
That doesn't. Try explaining that to the customer.
Right.
Like, I'm going over here. These guys got a double IPA at 6,
right.
at a 6 ounce pour. And we're like, we're 5%, and you can only have 2. It's interesting.
So you mentioned something that I've always thought about too, of in terms of the cider world, you said 5% ABV. Is that kind of a standard either for you at Stowe or ciders as a whole, or are there ciders that or like the Russian Imperial Stout of ciders where you're pushing 12, 13%.
Right. And so that's a great question. And so you've got ice ciders that'll typically can go all the way up to about 18%, when you're dealing with, we did a bourbon barrel aged ice cider that hit 18%. And that was hooch, but it was smooth. it was delicious and really, happy to be able to achieve that with a quality taste. But for the most part, ciders here in the Northeast, if you're using local apples, you're going to hit in that 6.5 to 7% because of the sugar content. And, you can get some of the heirloom fruit that's going to have higher concentrations of sugar, which are going to get you a higher, ABV in the final product. But the average blend here for our producers are going to be between 6 and 7. You're going to get down into the 5 and 5.5 when you've got more residual sugar or blended adjuncts, but blended flavors and fruits after the fact because they're blending in something that doesn't have alcohol. So you're going to drop that down. So, for example, if we taste, the Shandy, which I've got here today, you're going to find that that's a 5.5% because we're blending it with a homemade lemonade. So you're getting a nice cider. I'll go into the details of that later, but that's one example where our drier ciders are going to hit that 6.5% mark because they're, utilizing all the natural sugars in the fruit.
Cool. Kyle, this was awesome.
Yeah.
Tasting all these ciders. So good.
Yep.
And
little piece of Vermont right here in Florida with us.
That's exactly it. Like
absolutely
the entire time we've been talking to Mark, I'm like, man, we got to get back up to Vermont.
Yeah. That's on the to-do list.
Yeah. So Mark, going back to Stowe Cider specifically, what excites you most about the future of Stowe Cider?
Yeah, I mean, I think I first would have to say my staff and the team who's making this all happen. It's been a wild ride, especially over the last couple of years, but we've really come into our own. I'm proud of people we have here on our team and, the places we're going to be able to go and the things we're going to be able to do with this team. We're adding a kitchen. We're expanding our events. Distribution continues to be strong. We want to be a regional brand, so we are staying within New England, mostly in the Northeast, but going deeper in these markets with the team that we have and getting more liquid to lips in those areas and sharing those ciders is going to be huge. So I think first and foremost is just the culture and community we're continuing to build here, I think is what makes it all worth it.
How many people do you have on staff right now, Mark?
We've got 25.
Wow.
Up from 14 a little over a year ago, up from, about 7 the year before that. So, we've been lucky enough to find staff and really good people at that.
Yeah. I mean, that's amazing in the current world that we live in. Like that's absolutely amazing.
That, especially in, such a small community like Stowe where you have such a huge support too.
Mark, how could listeners of the podcast, how can we get our hands on some of your delicious Stowe cider products?
Well, the best way to do it is come visit us at the tap.
You are not wrong right there, sir. That is by far the best way.
Yeah, I mean, we've got music 4 days a week, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and then in the peak seasons on Sunday as well. We've been doing a brunch series, which we'll be excited to bring back this summer. And so those are pretty much 3 to 4 days guaranteed.
Awesome.
Some sort of live entertainment happening here over the weekends. But beyond that, you can order our product online. We ship to 38 states. The unfortunate pandemic that we've all been dealing with for the last couple of years is that we had to get creative, and we teamed up with Vino Shipper, who supports shipping product to 38 states.
Awesome.
So that's a good way. And we do distribute throughout the Northeast, all New England, New York, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania.
Fantastic.
So if listeners of Dripping Stone want to order some cider, where do they go?
Yeah, great. So stowecider.com, hit shop. We'll have a merch page there, as well as a shop cider page. Unfortunately, as it stands now, because of the compliance, you got to buy merch on one page and alcohol on the other page. But if that's the worst thing we have to deal with is 2 checkouts, I think you can handle it.
We can deal with it.
We'll find a way around that.
Indeed.
So, Mark, as we wrap things up here, is there anything you want to plug about Stowe Cider, about cider in general?
Just, continue to try. So if the first cider you haven't had, whether it be Stowe Cider or another product, keep trying. We're doing better to educate our consumers all the time. And by we, I mean the cider industry. So a lot of us are putting sweetness scales and descriptions on the can. So if you see it and it says dry and you're saying, oh, that's too tart, it wasn't quite for me, go back, try a semi-dry or a semi-sweet. If you're saying, oh, the apple is not just for me, I guarantee one of your local cider producers is making something with fruit, either a co-ferment with grapes or other fruits, or just blending with other fruits. And so I think there's going to be a cider style for you, and when you find it, you'll thank me, and you'll better even thank your local cider maker, because it is a very diverse beverage. It sits light, nice. It pairs well with food, as I mentioned earlier, and for me, it doesn't have that heavy feeling, and especially the next day. So I think if you can give it a chance, go to your local tasting room and try ciders and find the one that fits you best. So that would be what I'd love to see out of our listeners, and moving forward in the cider industry is just continuing to educate and keep trying.
Fantastic.
Absolutely. So we just want to say thanks again, Mark, for coming on, hanging out with us, and walking us through your amazing ciders.
Yeah, much obliged. Like we couldn't have done this without your help, and this has been an absolutely amazing experience for sure.
Well, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk cider, and I'm excited for you guys to come up and visit again sometime.
Same here.
Plane ticket bought. I mean,
no joke.
Mark, you mentioned brunch. We can probably convince the wives of that.
Yeah, no, totally. They're on board.
Just a quick plane ride. Well, 2 plane rides in our case, but yeah, we can make that happen. Man, that was a lot of fun.
Yeah, super cool to get that kind of a vantage point.
Yeah,
of like what it's like to work at a cidery. That's
for
so
sure.
cool.
And the ins of cider making as a whole. That's really cool.
Yep.
And I mean, we got to try some amazing ciders.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of fun, especially like with the person who makes the ciders.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Totally. And like very nostalgic in a way, because like we had such a good time up there.
Yeah,
Can't
we
wait
really
to get
did.
back.
So thanks again, Mark, and thanks everyone at the Stowe Cider crew. Like you guys, you're doing good work, and keep up that good work.
Keep doing what you do.
Absolutely. So if you've had a chance to get up to Stowe, if you've had a chance to sample Stowe Cider, let us know. Let us know what you think about it.
Absolutely.
You can get in touch with us through email. That's drepandstone@gmail.com. You can also get in touch with us through social media.
It's always one word: Drep and Stone, DREP and Stone. Come find us. Look at some stuff, like some stuff, share some stuff. We would appreciate all that stuff.
Absolutely. And you can support the podcast by telling anyone just on the street randomly about Drep and Stone. You can financially support the podcast through our Buy Me a Coffee page. It's buymeacoffee.com/Drep and Stone. And you can rate Drep and Stone wherever it is you find great podcasts like this one.
Yeah, give us those stars and all those thumbs ups.
Yeah.
All 4 of them.
All 4 thumbs?
Yeah.
We got foot thumbs?
I do.
Alabama.
I grab stuff with my feet.
Alabama, yeah. Hey, buddy.
Hey, buddy.
May your cider overflow.
And your ass never show. Apple cheers.
Cheers.
I wasn't recording.
Oh my God, are you serious?
I didn't say go.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you pushed it.
I didn't.
6 ciders, 3 minutes. Ready, go. Give us just a second. Can you hear us okay?
Now, so where did Drep and Stone come from?
The name or the podcast as a whole?
The name.
So
Okay.
Drep and Stone was born.
I mean, that's a decent origin story, I think.
Yeah, it's the best one I got. It's the only one we got.
Did you get that recorded? You might want to keep that.
That's right.
Unless somehow like a UPS truck comes in. Is it the cider? Which that's happened. How many times have we been recording? Like UPS comes, we're like, oh God,
Yeah.
Okay.
here's UPS.
Act cool.
Exactly. And he just leaves it on the doorstep.
Empty cans.
Wait a second.
Oh no, not again.
Yeah, I've got a funny story about that, but we'll save that for another time.
Okay. You want to know the ingredients?
Sure.
Fresh pressed apples.
Boom.
That's it. Because the O pressery doesn't work
Yeah,
out.
the oppressory. Did we even pitch that idea?
No, we
Damn
didn't.
it. Missed that one.
Sorry, Mark.
Please.
I've been that neighbor occasionally.
Whoa.
Just, you kids, get off my lawn.
Shaking the cane.
Old man yells at cloud kind of thing.
Give me the ginger.
Give me that ginger.
It's like reminiscent of that.
I can't tell if
I've
it's a
nosed
good
the gusher.
I was gonna
Absolutely,
say,
I have.
You haven't nosed the Granny Smith, but
I've snorted some gushers in my day. That doesn't leave you.
A half dozen ciders in the frog out there.
In terms
Neighbors.
like as you're talking about it, I'm like, man, like I need it right now. Like yeah.